resistance fighters or terrorists? This group makes up a major part of Lebanon's government, but Britain now says they're a terror group. I'm Imran Garta, and today's newsmaker is the UK's ban on Hezbollah. They're a major political and military force in the Middle East, but to the United Kingdom, Hezbollah is simply a terrorist organization and has been for a long time. For more than a decade, the group's military wing has been banned by Britain, but the government has now outlawed its political branch too. That means anyone in the UK with any association with the group could face up to 10 years behind bars. Lebanon's Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri says the decision won't affect relations with London, but Hezbollah has called the new designation an insult to the Lebanese people. So, did the UK make the right decision by banning one of the Middle East's most powerful political players? Natalie Perhonen reports.
Hezbollah is one of the most influential groups in Lebanon. It's also a part of the country's democratically elected government. But the UK has decided to declare the entire organisation a terrorist group. The British government had previously made a distinction between the political and military wing. The UK Home Secretary Sajid Javid says,
Hezbollah is continuing in its attempts to destabilise the fragile situation in the Middle East, and we are no longer able to distinguish between their already banned military wing and the political party.
The ban means being a member of or inviting support for Hezbollah carries a sentence of up to 10 years in prison. The Lebanese government says it was given advance notice about the decision and that the UK Foreign Secretary told them it shouldn't have a direct effect on relations between Lebanon and Britain.
Even if the entire world says that the resistance, Hezbollah, is terrorism, this will not affect us, as our land is still occupied and the resistance will stay embraced by the government, the parliament, the state institutions, and all Lebanese people.
Hezbollah has said the UK's decision shows what it called servile obedience to the United States. The UK is standing alone for now in its decision to change the terrorist designation to include all of Hezbollah. The EU and individual member states like France say they will continue to recognise its political arm as separate to the military wing and therefore not designated as a terrorist group.
Nous continuerons à avoir ce distinguo parce que c'est ce distinguo qui permet d'une part de lutter contre ceux qui ont une action justement militaire de type terroriste et ce qui permet aussi de poursuivre cette politique dite de désassociation du Liban, c'est-à-dire d'éviter que le Liban ne soit en quelque sorte le théâtre importé de tous les conflits régionaux.
Hezbollah began as a Shia resistance movement against the Israeli occupation of southern Lebanon in the 1980s. It was founded by Iran's Revolutionary Guard, and Iran continues to be its key backer. The group views Israel as its perpetual enemy. It remains in a state of armed resistance against the Israeli state. And it is heavily armed and mobile, sending fighters to various parts of the Middle East, including to Syria, where it backs the Assad regime. But it's in the political realm where Hezbollah has been publicly expanding its reach. Since the 2009 Lebanese elections, the power of Hezbollah has grown. It, along with its allies, won more than half of the seats in parliament in last year's election. It controls 3 government ministries, including health. The UK government says listing the entirety of Hezbollah as a terrorist group doesn't change Britain's strong relationship with Lebanon. But that may be a difficult position to maintain when Lebanon itself doesn't hold the same view of Hezbollah's political role in Lebanese life. Natalie Perhonen, The Newsmakers.
Well, to discuss this, I'm joined now from Beirut by Jamal Husn. He's a former managing editor of Al Akhbar daily newspaper. In London, we have Rakib Ehsan, a research fellow in the Centre on Radicalisation and Terrorism at the Henry Jackson Society. And Afzal Ashraf is an expert in terrorism and global security at Nottingham University, as well as a former counterinsurgency and political specialist in Iraq. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. Rakib Ehsan, let me start with you. So, the government has criminalised essentially a third of the Lebanese government and said that Hezbollah's political wing is also terrorist. Is that helpful?
I think that when looking at that question, you have to really consider the current social climate in the United Kingdom in regards to anti-Semitism. The British Jewish community increasingly feels socially unsafe. They also feel politically abandoned. They don't have much, currently, levels of faith in the political system in terms of tackling anti-Semitism is currently at an all-time low. So in this context, you have to really consider Hezbollah's ideology and how that really fits in with the decision to prescribe Hezbollah in its entirety as a terrorist organization.
Okay, so Jamal, forget Syria, forget what's happening in Lebanon, forget the geopolitics of the Middle East. What's happening in the UK, according to Rakib, is that there's a culture of anti-Semitism. Hezbollah is anti-Semitic, and that's why this government is deciding to ban them. How do you feel about that?
First of all, I mean, if we forget about Israeli occupation in the region, if we forget about Israeli aggression against Lebanon, continuous aggression, and we want to look at the world from a very UK-centric point of view, then we should just ask what the British want to do and just follow suit. But that's not, obviously, there are a lot of factors that go into consideration here. We're looking at a party that's part of the Lebanese government. A large part of the population in Lebanon supports Hezbollah and thus have been basically declared criminal by the UK government. And it's also a very vague law that we'll have to wait and see if they ever, or who will they prosecute under this law. It will probably end up being someone retweeting something or other comment from a Hezbollah politician or something in Birmingham or Manchester. So from that point of view, it's a very UK-centric view of the world. But there, I mean, I guess they're used to impose their views on the world, but in this case, it's just they're overreaching, really. Okay,
so the deed is done, Jamal. Sajid Javid has done it. They're on the list. I wonder, does Hassan Nasrallah care?
I mean, I can't speak for Hassan Nasrallah, but I'm pretty sure a resistance movement that was created to fight Israeli occupation in Lebanon, and we all know the history that the UK played in the establishment of the State of Israel. I think the last thing he thinks about when he wakes up in the morning is how to make Sajid Javid happy. So I would say, no, he doesn't really care.
Okay, Afzal, let me ask you, is this because of domestic considerations, culture of anti-Semitism, as Rakib has said, alleged anti-Semitism on the left with Labour and Corbyn and so on, and I guess also a way to send a message to the likes of Jeremy Corbyn that this Tory government is different? Is it that in the UK, or is it about geopolitics in the region and the Israelis and the Americans and the Gulf Arab countries trying to twist the UK's arm to be on side? Which one is it more of?
I think it's probably more of the global politics. I'm not aware of this being an issue. It certainly hasn't been an issue of debate internally in the UK. So if it had been, then the Conservative government, which is in a very difficult situation with Brexit, would certainly have built up a momentum against Hezbollah on the back of this claim of anti-Semitism, but none of it has really appeared in public debate. What we do see, of course, is the recognition that the war against Daesh in Syria has come to an end. The reasons for the US being there and supporting what in many other analyses has been described as regime change in Syria is moving away. So what many analysts have suggested is that the regime change was being primarily motivated to drain the support that the Syrian regime had provided to Hezbollah. Hezbollah is an organization that more than any other in recent times has constrained Israel both politically and militarily, certainly in northern Lebanon for the last decade and a half. And so we can understand that it's in Israel's interest to weaken Hezbollah, and it's also in the interest of Israel's friends in the West in order to facilitate that. And I think it's probably in that context that this decision is being made or suggested by the Home Secretary.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Rakib, isolate Iran, isolate Assad, weaken Hezbollah, strengthen the Israelis, strengthen the Sunni Gulf Arab states. That's the geopolitics of it, isn't it?
I think for me, if I'm being perfectly honest, I think, you know, we've heard terms such as UK-centric so far. The reality of the matter is the Home Secretary, his priority is to ensure the security and welfare of UK citizens, and that includes the British Jewish community. Now, the reality of the matter is Hezbollah has a clear anti-Semitic character. The British Jewish community increasingly feel socially unsafe. There's a recent survey by the EU's Agency on Fundamental Rights, which showed that in comparison to the survey which took place 6 years ago, up to 90% of British Jewish people feel more unsafe. They feel that anti-Semitism has increased. Up to 30% have actually considered leaving the UK for fears over their safety. So in terms of talking about this not being on the agenda, I think the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, he's raised this as an issue when Amber Rudd was Home Secretary. And I think, to be perfectly honest, I think it's one thing that the Mayor of London has done exceptionally well on. And all in all, when you look at the military wing, political wing, this has become increasingly difficult to differentiate when looking at the organizational structure.
Help me understand. Okay, so help me understand, right? So you have, I don't know, pro-Palestine rallies. What's the problem? Hezbollah flags at those rallies, Hezbollah slogans. What's the connection between clear anti-Semitism and harm that might come to the Jewish community and banning Hezbollah? Tell me.
I think the reality of the matter is you have to take into consideration the social developments and political developments which have taken place in the UK. The Home Secretary, the clue is very much in the office of the name of the office. He has to look at home affairs. He has to look at things that are happening domestically on the social and political front. And the reality of the matter is Hezbollah, they are of a clear anti-Semitic character. So the decision to prescribe them as a terrorist organisation, I feel, is a welcome one. And all the UK is doing is following in the footsteps of other advanced liberal democracies such as Canada and the United States.
Jamal?
He's insisting that Hezbollah has an anti-Semitic character. And, I mean, the Home Secretary here declared them a terrorist organization. So here we have, we need, I mean, proof of any attacks that Hezbollah have perpetrated against Jews in Europe or in the UK. There haven't been any. This is a
so you have to wait until a terrorist organization.
He's just pandering. He's just pandering. Sorry.
Go ahead, Jamal.
So you have to wait until
he's just pandering to the right wing and
okay.
Javid has Sajid Javid has now he's eyeing the prime minister job, and he's pandering to the right wing in Europe and the pro-Israeli lobby in the UK. And this is why he did that, because the threat is imaginary. There was never any attack. There will never be an attack. This is like warning against, I don't know, unicorn gorings and promising to attack those and calling them terrorists. They never happened. So he's just pandering to the pro-Israeli lobby, trying
you have the luxury of saying that you're not Home Secretary for the United Kingdom.
Theresa May. No, and I would actually, if I was, I would worry more about real threats, such as the stabbings that have been taking place and targeting young people all over the major cities there. These are real threats. These you've had dozens of people killed by stabbings from violence let's give Rakib a chance. Erupting.
Okay, fair enough, Jamal. Rakib, come in.
No, I mean, I think ultimately there's a bit of whataboutery going on, you know, bringing in issues such as knife crime. You know, the mayor also has, the Mayor of London, for example, has a responsibility to ensure that the capital's Jewish community also feels safe and they feel that they belong in the capital in which they live in. So I think they're mixing different issues, talking about other people's political ambitions. I don't see it as pandering to the right wing to prescribe a organisations, to prescribe an organisation such as Hezbollah, to talk about that would only command the support of the right-wing fringes of British society is simply untrue. I think you'll find that many British Muslims would find that anti-Semitic political messages, which often come out of the Hezbollah organisation, they would find that they would be appalled by that. So the idea that this is just simply pandering to right-wing fringes, and it's quite frankly, I don't believe that. I don't buy that at all.
Can you list some of these statements that you're talking about that don't exist?
I think the idea that you're trying to deflect the fact that this not... So would you say that personally, Hezbollah, there is an anti-Semitic strand to Hezbollah's organisational ideology? Would you say that
no,
right now?
No, there isn't. There is a resistance against Israeli occupation,
then I'm sorry,
which is very
we have to disagree
different.
on that. We would absolutely disagree on that. I feel that Hezbollah is clearly an anti-Semitic organisation, and so we'll agree to disagree on it.
There is a problem right now with the right wing in the UK, which is basically it's going to become like the boy who cried wolf. They're throwing this anti-Semitic smear against people who have not been anti-Semitic. For God's sake, they accuse the most anti-racist person in the UK right now in politics, and like Jeremy Corbyn, of being anti-Semitic.
This
is ridiculous.
Because he's been incredibly relaxed in addressing anti-Semitism within his party.
Okay, so let me grab a hold of this and pause this for a second, right? Rakib believes Hezbollah is anti-Semitic. Jamal disputes that. Let me go to Afzal and go back to the policy itself and the decision that's been made. Whatever the roots of the policy, whatever the justifications for the policy, and we haven't got a whole lot of explanation coming from the Home Office. That's why there's a bit of speculation as to whether it's geopolitics or domestic. Whatever that might be, Afzal, is it the right or wrong decision to make? Is it going to harm Britain's interests?
Well, I think that's a very good question, and it's a question that needs a lot of thought, and it's not one that can be answered very briefly. But one thing that I will say is that the reason why the Home Secretary is involved in this decision is that once an organisation is prescribed within a country, then certain measures can be taken against it. One of those measures, of course, will be financial, and sanctions and other things can then be put into place against Hezbollah. The big problem here is that as you say, putting the rights and wrongs of Hezbollah's behavior aside and putting the rights and wrongs of any interest that might be there, is that many of these measures do not always work, and certainly increasingly don't work. And when they do work, they have unintended consequences. What I mean by this is if very harsh sanctions were put in place, not just by the UK, but by the international community, against an organization which, for whatever reason, is supplying about a third of the services in terms of health, education and other services to the people of Lebanon, which is helping to bind a country together which was in previous situations at war with a very long, bloody civil war. What might happen is, on one hand, you might get the Lebanese population actually uniting and supporting Hezbollah. On the other hand, if these sanctions or these measures, political measures, work, it might actually fragment the country and we might have a resurgence of civil war. What we might also have, as we have seen in other conflicts, is a major displacement of people. If the country comes to its needs, then we will get migration, we will get asylum and other issues that will affect Europe. There may well be better, more positive ways to achieve the interests of the nations within the region. And that may well be to learn from organizations such as those that were involved in the overthrow of Slobodan Milosevic in Serbia, and provide positive help for the opposition to Hezbollah in a much more constructive way. So my answer to your question in a simple sense is that the measures that might be put in place for whatever reasons don't always work, and they don't always have the intended consequences. And what we need is a much more creative and probably a much more positive way of displacing the nefarious or unwanted influences of Hezbollah in the region.
Something for the UK to mull over. The Lebanese president is a
indeed.
staunch Hezbollah ally. Lebanese army coordinates with Hezbollah. Hezbollah controls 3 ministries, and if you add its allies together, 70 of the 128 parliamentary seats. All prescribed now as terrorists. It's going to be fascinating to see how the UK deals with that in terms of policy moving forward. Gentlemen, I've got to move on to another segment. I thank you all for joining us. Jamal Husn, Rakib Ahsan, and Afzal Ashraf. Thanks again. Coming up next, forces loyal to Libyan strongman Khalifa Haftar say they've seized control of the south. But did they kill civilians along the way? Libya is rich in oil, and whoever controls that commodity has considerable power. Libya's rebel commander Khalifa Haftar knows it. His forces fought militia loyal to the UN-backed government for control of the largest oil field and won. But did they go too far in their push for power? One member of parliament says they did, accusing Haftar's men of killing about 20 civilians. Randolph Nogel explores.
Eight years after a revolution to depose Libya's longtime leader, Muammar Gaddafi, another strongman has emerged. And the promise of democracy has so far been deferred. General Khalifa Haftar and his Libyan National Army, DLNA, are consolidating control of the country's #1 commodity, oil. After launching an offensive with the stated aim of defeating al-Qaeda and Daesh in Libya's lawless southern desert, they've now taken control of the city of Marzouk, along with 2 oil fields, the Sharara and Al-Fil. Sharara is Libya's largest oil field, and the 2 combined have a production capacity that equals almost half the country's current output. Haftar's forces now control almost all of the onshore oil sector, as well as the east of the country. The rival General National Assembly, Libya's UN-backed government in Tripoli, controls the west and has the loyalty of the National Oil Company, which manages Libya's oil exports. But with Haftar's hands on the taps of Libya's main source of revenue, it's unclear whether he'll relinquish the oil fields, along with his militia, for the sake of unity and democracy. Libya's internationally recognized Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj met General Haftar in Abu Dhabi last month. The UN says both agreed to hold elections.
We want elections because Libyans want them, but to have the election that solve the problem and don't aggravate it. Some terms have to be respected. The first of these terms is to have law, and there is no law now. The second term is that all the Libyan factions have to commit to the result of these elections.
No date has yet been set. Many still hope the power struggle between Libya's rival forces will end with the start of a new democracy, and that the promise of Libya's revolution can finally be realized. Randolph Nogel, The Newsmakers.
Well, to discuss this, let's go to San Antonio, Texas, where we're joined by Mansour al-Kakhia. He's the author of Libya's Gaddafi, The Politics of Contradiction. In Paris is Libyan academic and journalist Mustafa Fatouri. And in London is Jamal Gamati. He's the head of the Tahrir Party in Libya and member of the UN-backed political dialogue group. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. Jamal Gamati, let me begin with you. On this very program not too long ago, we were talking about Haftar's future, whether he was going to live, when we heard that he had irreversible brain damage. Now we're talking about a man who controls the east of the country, most of the south of the country. Has he committed atrocities along the way?
Well, according to international human rights organizations, people who are under his command have, absolutely. And we have seen video footage and many proofs of committing atrocities in the east and possibly in the south as well, in the cities of Morzig and other places, especially against Tabu. But we leave that to the judiciary in Libya, and we leave that to the International Criminal Court, and we leave that to international human rights organizations to follow and document that.
Okay, so Mansour al-Kakhia, if this can be proven, doesn't it mean that essentially the man that many want to control the country and the man that's jostling for power with Sarraj is a warlord and he's committing atrocities?
Yes, a simple question. Answer to your question is yes. If he has done that, yes. But I don't see. I know the man. I don't think he will order the killing of innocent civilians. He will not do that. That you have under him working rogue officers or rogue individuals who would do that. Yes, I would say this. But you have to give everything its own shape. And basically, what you're dealing with a lawless area of the country that has been lawless for many years. That we have gangs coming in from Chad, from Niger, from I don't know where. Okay, and there's no law and order. So basically, when his forces go in there, they have to deal with these issues. That they killed people innocently, and I agree with you. They should be held and should be held accountable. And I agree with Mr. Igmati that the legal system should come into effect. But that these things happen, yes, they do happen constantly.
Mustafa, is that an accurate description of the current situation on the ground?
Yes, more or less I would agree with that. It's quite accurate, actually. And I just want to add something here, I don't, again, just like our colleague said from the States, it's very unlikely that Haftar will order any kind of killing or mass killing or brutality against civilians or otherwise even fighters. But the point is in Libya today, I mean, since 2011, there is no law and order, especially in the south and in most parts of the eastern of the country before Mr. Haftar manages to take over. I prefer to say the army, not him personally. And the other thing is, I know, for instance, for example, since probably 2016, late 2017, there was a team in the United States who are trying to bring a criminal case against Mr. Haftar because they allege that he has committed crimes against humanity and he was involved with inviting outside the United States since he is a U.S. citizen, so they can prosecute him. The question is, it's very unlikely that something like this will happen. That's the first thing. The second thing, especially when it comes to the recent advances of the Libyan army under his command in the south of the country, I really doubt much of the reports we have been seeing or hearing. I was in the country, I just came back about a week ago, and what really happened in Morzag, which is a very unfortunate actually, the number of civilians who were killed most likely is less than 20. And the other important thing, which is not being reported, is the fact most of those...
Mustafa, it doesn't make it right.
No, of course not. No, it's very unfortunate. Still, no, of course not. I agree with you. I mean, it's very unfortunate even if one person is killed. But one important point here is that Morzag has been almost more or less for the last 2.5 years taken over by Tabu from Chad, mainly from Chad and some from Niger as well. And the problem with those people is that they want to force themselves on the locals because they are related to them, blood related and tribal related, because we have some Tabus there, some Libyan Tabus, and they want to become Libyans, And when Haftar got there, got very close, the mistake he made probably was that the supporting forces that were supporting him in the ground, actually from a tribe called the Awlad Suleiman, mainly located in Sabha, and they were leading the fight towards Morzag. And there is a huge animosity between Awlad Suleiman tribe and the Tabu, and that's what really happened. But I don't really hold Mr. Haftar responsible for that.
I want to bring in Juma here to talk about the politics. So there's this meeting in Abu Dhabi. They had the meeting, Siraj and Haftar. They spoke about moving forward, peace talks, and hopefully wanting elections. How would you describe the atmosphere of those talks and if they were serious or not?
Actually, sources confirm that the discussions that took place in Abu Dhabi led to no concrete agreement. Nothing was agreed or finalized, and nothing was signed. There were exchanges of ideas to do with the issue of who should be the supreme commander, whether Haftar would submit to and accept that there would be a civilian supreme commander to the forces, like the head of the state, or in our case at the moment, the head of the GNA, the Government of National Accord, which would be Faiz Sarraj. And then what will the title of or the job of a general commander of the army mean and entail? And is it a position that can be changed, or is it a position that has to be reserved for Mr. Haftar for life? These are the kind of discussions that took place. Nothing has been agreed. I think it's a continuation of other discussions that took place in Cairo to attempt to unite the Libyan army. And by the way, Mr. Sarraj and Haftar are only two parties, two sides of the Libyan landscape, political landscape. So there are many, many other very important sides and parties that need to be brought in, and they need to be part of any solution.
But Juma, allow me for a second to just look at what's in it for Haftar to go to elections, right? He doesn't have any incentive, does he? He's taking up more and more territory as we go along amid the lawlessness, because his militia is the strongest. He has the oil. He's controlling big parts of the country. Why would he ever want to go into a political settlement? There's nothing incentivizing him, is there?
Okay, well, there are two issues here. First of all, let me just talk about the issue of extending his military campaign to the south. There are two motives. There is a declared official motive and there is a hidden motive. The declared official motive is that he is trying to kick or expel or eradicate foreign militias from Chad and Niger who are causing havoc in Libya, which is fine, which is an acceptable reason. However, there is double standards here. Because at the same time, Haftar is using foreign militias to fight on his side as mercenaries. And I'm talking about the Sudanese, Darfurian opposition group, Justice and Equality. Hundreds of them are fighting alongside Haftar, and he's paying them money as mercenaries to fight with him. So isn't there a hypocrisy here? Isn't there a double standard here? If Mr. Haftar wants to kick all foreign militias causing criminality and havoc in Libya, we should kick all of them, whether they are Chadian, whether they are Nigerians, or whether they are Sudanese. So that torpedoes this premise that he's kicking out foreign militias. Now, and the hidden motive, the hidden real motive is to convert his military campaign into a political gain. And in fact, I disagree with you. I think Haftar is in a hurry to have elections even before a permanent constitution. He has been pushing very hard, and his supporters and his sponsors, the Emiratis, have been pushing hard for quick, snappy presidential election without a solid constitutional base, without a permanent constitution, because time is not on Haftar's side. The man is nearly 80. So that's why he wants to some sort of elections that he thinks he will win outright and will get him to power, and then he will turn against the idea of elections and democracy altogether, and he will establish a military dictatorship rule in Libya again.
Mustafa, does it suit Haftar to ask and to push for those elections?
Well, I mean, the question of elections is regardless of what has been said about mercenaries, because everybody seems to have used them, you know, and even Gaddafi have been accused of that, and nobody has proved anything so far. But, you know, Haftar is in the road to become the main figure in Libya. How you translate that into politics, I don't really know. You know, becomes a president, becomes whatever. For the, you know, based on the reality today, the man controls almost 2/3 of the country. This is one thing. The other side, combined, all the others who are against him, who are opposing him, they have miserably failed so far over the last 8 years to produce anything, to provide anything for the Libyans, or at least the Libyans they control. They namely in Western Libya. This is one thing. The other thing, this is a man, I mean Mr. Haftar, who have, you know, kind of deep feeling that he has the right, you know, some kind of a historical right, if you like, to run the country. Because he has been, you know, living abroad for a long time after he failed with fallout with Gaddafi, and he was a refugee in the United States for quite some time, and he came back specifically for this purpose. This is one thing. The other thing, or a strong motive that really pushes him is the fact what he saw in after 2011 and how he was actually denied any role after the immediate war in 2011 ended in the civil war ended in October 2011, the same year when Gaddafi was murdered. He was pushed aside. He was sidelined. He was denied. If we go to election today, or next week, or the month after, or something, I believe he will have some kind of a serious challenge. He will be very serious challenge to anybody. The man has the popularity because of what he did in Libya, and he is gaining popularity, and he can easily translate his military gains into political victory. Yes, please.
Mansour, if an election was declared today, would Haftar be the winner?
No, not necessarily. But this is the major issue. I mean, it's very easy to hate. I mean, you hate somebody, well, I don't like it. Listen to me. Look at what Libya is going through for the last 8 years. I'm not saying Haftar is the panacea for all Libya's ills. No, I'm not saying that. What I'm trying to tell you is that 8 years after Gaddafi, look at what we have in the country. Look at the lawlessness, the corruption, this facade of democracy that we say. We have a government that says, well, you didn't elect me, you didn't put me in power, the Europeans did. We have a government in the East that's a defeat this whole awful government. We really are in a desperate situation in Libya. We really are. Haftar has been smart. He really has been very smart. He has entered those areas without using too much force, the minimal amount of force. And he learned this from Benghazi. He destroyed half of Benghazi. But then moving otherwise, why doesn't he go to Misrata? Why doesn't he go to Sirte? Why doesn't he go to Tripoli? In Tripoli, he'll be welcomed with open arms. But he's doing it, he's eating bit by bit. So he's garnering support. Whether he will win in the elections, it's up to the Libyan people. Libyans have been very forthcoming in voting, 84%, 85%.
Right.
They'll vote. But under the circumstances, we have to put this country in order in terms of lawlessness and types of respect of law, respect of life and property. And no one's been doing that.
Okay, so let me ask Juma. So Juma, because Mansour believes there's a facade of democracy, that's why we need to lower the bar of the democratic credentials of anybody that wants to take over right now, because the context is it's been 8 years of hell for the Libyan people. You need a law and order candidate, not a fake UN-backed government that doesn't even control the bulk of the country.
Well, no one is saying that next year we're going to have a perfect democracy emulating the Scandinavian or North European democracies. Of course, we are starting from a very, very low point, because for 42 years, it's been a total hell, despotism, dictatorship, denying people any form of political participation or practicing polity. But what the Libyan people aspire to, the majority of them, is that to be honest with you, we have two options on the table. We have two choices now. Either we move forward to establish a civilian state, constitutional state, run by civilians based on elections, and it will be just the start of democratization. Democratization is an cumulative process.
That will never work.
It has to improve with years and decades, or we regress back to one-man military dictatorship, which we had for 42 years. Remember, Haftar with Gaddafi, was part of that military coup that took place on September 1st, 1969, that toppled a constitutional, legal monarchy political system. And we had 42 years of dictatorship. Now the Libyans want to establish another constitutional, legal, civilian political system that actually draws its legitimacy from the people. But Haftar wants to deny us that. He wants to regress us back to the 42 years of Gaddafi. These are the two choices.
How do you know?
Listen, Mustafa, we're out of time. Listen, gentlemen, we're out of time, but listen, we can continue this very soon. Gigantic answers about the future of Libya. We will no doubt have you all back on the show very soon. Mansour Al-Kakhia, Mustafa Fetouri, and Jamal Gamati. I thank you all once again for joining us here on The Newsmakers. That's all for this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. Check out more of our stories on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. Remember to like, follow and subscribe. Next time, thousands of migrant children have allegedly been sexually assaulted while in US custody. Is Trump to blame, or is the problem much bigger? Until then, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.